The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for hosting us today and for the interview. Germany has been supporting Georgia's EU integration process and social economic development for years. Our diplomatic relationships were launched in 1992, and since then Germany has been a good friend and a partner for Georgia. What would you say where Georgia's EU integration process stands now?
So it's my pleasure to join you, and it's exactly right. We have been a very good friend and partner to Georgia for 30 years, more than 30 years. And we are at an impasse now. We are at a crisis of our relations. Because around the change of the year 2023, 2024, the Georgian government has decided that we are no longer a good friend and partner. So we just judge things by the facts. And our partnership has been based on Georgia's ambition for Euro-Atlantic integration, which, as far as we can tell, the Georgian people have always told us we want to be a democracy, we want to be a market economy, we want to do Euro-Atlantic integration, we would like to join the EU, we would like to join NATO, we even put it in our constitution. And that's the basis for our partnership. However, the facts created by the Georgian government speak against that course, because if you want to join the EU, you have to adopt EU legislation. It's very simple. To join the EU means European Union legislation is the law of the land in the new member. When that happens, you're a member. As long as that does not happen, you cannot be a member, because that's the essence of the EU, that we share the same legislation in all EU member states. And we even made the greatest act of partnership and friendship, and if you like, I like to say, a sign of love and affection. We offered Georgia candidate status to our union. That's the core of our societal and political existence, the European Union. We said, you can join us. And we made that offer on an advance of trust, because the conditions to join the EU are very clear. They're all written down, by the way. You can read them. Nobody here bothers to read them, but I just recommend, if you care about it, read. Now, we said there are 9 points that Georgia should fulfill to get candidate status. And Georgia said, yes, we will work very hard. We will fulfill the 9 points. Georgia did not fulfill the 9 points, none of them. And then we gave it anyway. We said, we give you candidate status in the understanding that you will. We trust you that you will. And last December, I think it was the 15th of December, I stood with all the EU ambassadors and the entire Georgian government and the chairman of the Georgian Dream political party on a stage on Freedom Square in front of 100,000 people, and we all celebrated candidate status. And right afterwards, the mood turned. The Georgian government reintroduced the law, the so-called law on transparency of foreign influence, which is against the fundamentals of the EU. It's not just not in compliance, it's in gross contradiction to everything the EU stands for. Because at the foundation of the EU is democracy and rule of law institutions. And this law is completely incompatible. Everyone knows the reasons. Expertises have been handed to the Georgian government on behalf of the EU. It passed another law on LGBTQ, which is also not compatible with EU membership. And it changed its rhetoric. Germany is no longer addressed as a friend and as a partner. We're thrown in to a crazy notion of a global war party, We're accused of promoting liberal fascism, whatever that's supposed to be, because liberal is freedom and many ideas exist side by side. That's Germany, that's the European Union. Fascism is only one idea is good and all the others are inferior. So it doesn't fit together. We're accused of supporting revolution here. Yeah, we're foreign agents, we're no longer friends and partners. In the terminology of the Georgian government, we're being called foreign agents. And we're accused of trying to draw Georgia into the Ukraine war. All of that is completely untrue, we completely reject it, and this was the answer of the Georgian government to our act of friendship and partnership to offering the candidate status. So the answer to the question is where we stand at an impasse, we stand at a crisis moment. And the future of Georgia in the EU is highly in question right now. Also, in June and again in October, the leaders of the European Union decided and wrote down in their decision that the accession process has come to a halt. It's also written down. Nobody here bothers to read it, but I recommend to read it. The government is telling you, no, nothing is halted. We decide what's halted and what's not halted. The candidate doesn't decide. So it's halted. And if you ask me, I don't see it coming back on track in the near future. I don't see any positive signs of that at all. The rhetoric continues. The legislation is adopted. Georgia is moving away from the European Union instead of closer. Plus, the way the election was conducted is not compatible to what we expect from a candidate country. If you ask anyone in Germany, most anyone, because we have a high diversity of opinions, of course, but the great majority of people will tell you that if they look at the Georgians' elections, they will say, we don't want that in Europe. And the trend is going away from Georgia. So it's a crisis, and I think there's a high risk that maybe you missed your opportunity.
What does this crisis mean for the business sector? So this rubric is run within the Business Morning Show, and we are addressing business. What this crisis right now means for the companies that want to be present on the EU market. We have signed the EU-Georgia Association Agreement, DCFTA is part of it, and the Georgian companies has been using this opportunity to get their services and products on the EU market. This crisis where we are right now, what does it mean for the companies?
Well, it means you will continue doing business as you have been doing, and with very low integration with the European market. And you will miss the giant opportunity to become a member, a full-fledged member of the single European Union market, which is one of the top 3 markets in the world. And there's different ways to evaluate, but I kind of tend to say, perhaps the US is a little bit too free, not enough environmental protection, not enough social protection, and China is a little bit too controlled, so the EU is a pretty good market. We have a very high level of prosperity in the EU, and if this crisis remains unresolved and the trend continues as it has been, then you won't join the EU and you won't join the single market. And you know, Georgia has not made very much progress in integrating into the EU market. I think since the coming into effect of the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement in 2016, you've only increased your exports, so Georgian goods going to the EU market, by 2%, something like that. So minimal. Because, maybe this will bring us to the technical part of our interview, we have standards in the EU. And to meet them, to import into our market, you have to meet those standards. For Georgia, because it's mainly agricultural products, it's the phytosanitary standards. So you can't just send any milk or any fruit or any nut or any jam to the EU. It has to meet a certain high standard, because we have also a high standard of consumer protection. And so far, Georgian companies have not fulfilled those standards to any noticeable degree.
Before we dive into the standards and also whether the Georgian businesses are compatible with the sustainability standards as well that are required at the EU market, my question would be, considering the crisis that we are now in terms of the EU integration process, what do you think the role of the business sector can be? How they can help the Georgian people to become part of the EU?
I mean, so business sector is always very important. That's where we generate our jobs, our income, our wealth, our prosperity. I notice that in Georgia we speak a lot about politics and political machinations and people and who's for Russia and who's not for Russia, instead of talking about what matters more to people's everyday life. Why do we have politics? So people can have a good life. And for good life, people need to have a reasonable income, a roof over their head, enough food, money for their health, money to educate their children, and so on, right? So personally, I would think that joining the EU is the best thing that can happen to the Georgian economy and to the business sector. You won't join the US, you won't join the North American Free Trade Agreement. I doubt you will join the Chinese economy. So it's really the only alternative that's available, rather than staying where you are, in the South Caucasus, sort of, you know, with the neighbors that you have, with good relationship with Turkey and all that, sort of staying in place. And the EU, business people trade and invest mainly with themselves, amongst themselves. Why? Because we have a framework, a legal and business framework that people know, that they feel familiar with, and that is also safe. Of course, some people say there's too much regulation, the tax should be higher, lower, but generally it's a pretty good. That's why we invest mainly amongst ourselves. So as Georgia was getting closer to the EU, European businessmen would look at Georgia and would say, aha, I see they're advancing towards us. I think maybe I should study opportunities there, because I expect that they will have a doing business framework with everything that belongs to it, which is good, which I like to invest in. It's a fact, and I've heard many such stories, that as Georgia has put a full brake on its European accession, a lot of business people are reconsidering, and I know accounts of business people who have said, well, maybe not, I'll wait. I even know accounts of people who said, I made an investment, it's not a big investment, but I'm going to wind it down. So the question is the Georgian economy an economy that's moving towards the EU, which is a certain established, large, prosperous, functioning framework, or does Georgia remain kind of an emerging market in the Southern Caucasus for whatever that's worth? I mean, that's a choice that Georgia can make. So if I were a Georgian business person, I would try to tell my government which choice I prefer.
If we specifically look at the relations of the Georgian companies with the German companies and the investments coming in from Germany and from Georgia to Germany, the products and services, how do you assess this, and what is the trend? Is it increasing, decreasing? Where do we stand?
So I don't know the most current numbers. I would guess that it's decreasing, and my projection is that it will decrease. if Georgia moves further away from the EU, it's just not very interesting to German investors. It's a small market, not integrated into any other big market. I mean, Georgia is the size of our big cities, right? Right now, even the investment is not significant. We have a couple of companies that are invested here with not very large sums and not very high value-added activity. And even a company like Heidelberg Cement withdrew from the Georgian market. It was one of our biggest investments. It sold its shares. So the trend is not good. I'm sorry to be a little bit negative, but it's important to talk about it. I noticed that in Georgia the discussion is, oh, we have such great growth rates, growing faster than all those lousy Europeans. Those Germans don't even have any growth. We Georgians have 10% growth. It's a windfall from the Russian attack on Ukraine. Windfalls don't last. And I see a lot of structural problems. I see a challenge to the value of the lari. I see fluctuations in the stock market prices of your companies that are listed on foreign stock exchanges. I think a relatively high proportion of your government debt is in concessional loans. The further you move away from the EU, the less concessional loans we will give you. It's a law of nature. So you'll have to refinance that by yourselves. The risk premium of your own government bonds over benchmark bonds like EU or US bonds will rise, has risen and will continue to rise. And I see a big problem for the Georgian economy, where I don't see how Georgia intends to solve it, is the immigration of the young people. Already since 2018 or 2019, I think so many young people left Georgia, mainly for the EU, by the way, that it makes about 3% of your population have left as young people. And now I hear many young people telling me that if the decision is that Georgia will move further away from the EU and stay here as a country in the Southern Caucasus and not follow anymore this Euro-Atlantic integration, then I will leave. I hear many.
It's a very difficult situation that we are right now, and from this conversation it's a bit hard to move towards sustainability topic, but the UN Global Compact in Georgia promotes sustainability within the business sector, and sustainability is a core for the EU as well. All the regulations that we're talking about in terms of the climate mitigation, in terms of the social sustainability, governance issues, those are enshrined in the EU directives that apply to the businesses, and businesses need to comply with them to be present on the EU market. You are supporting Georgia's economic development as well, the German government. How would you say whether the businesses in Georgia are aligning with those standards or should align more with those, or what is the requirements that the EU have in order to, in terms of sustainability, in order to be present?
So just to make the transition, the only reason I'm being honest and that I can't paint a very rosy picture is because Germany still considers itself a friend of Georgia. And friends speak to each other honestly. We don't support each other's illusions and fantasies. It's my job to say what the German government thinks and what the EU thinks. So that's why I'm being very frank with you.
And thank you so much for that.
I don't want to discourage anyone, but I'm a little bit discouraged myself, honestly. Now, let's look at sustainability. The whole world is on an unsustainable path, right? Just to be a little bit more dark. We're using our natural resources faster than they can replenish. we're in a climate crisis. I think that's a fact. Unfortunately, some governments elect leaders that say the climate crisis is not real and we should just continue using more oil and gas. But 99% of all scientists tell us, and we can see with our eyes, that the climate crisis is real. Just look at the news. Every week you have a weather catastrophe somewhere. I know very well the distinction between weather and climate, but more frequent and more intense weather catastrophes are a result of climate change. And I think Georgia is also very behind on all that. So we need to advance much faster on sustainability and the laws and regulations all around that, circular economy, green economy, energy efficiency, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If we want to save this planet, it's as easy as that. And well, look at the fleet of cars that's driving around Georgia. I think they're very far away from EU regulations. In fact, most of them are crashed old cars that come from the EU and other countries that are here because they don't meet any more regulations in our countries. So we have finance programs, 2 big programs. Shall I tell you their names?
That would be good.
We have 2 big programs. One is the Green Growth Fund, GGF, and the European Fund for Southeast Europe. And Germany, those are financing programs, the concessional finance that I gave. It's very cheap money. You can't go to a normal bank and get that. You get that if you're a state that is aspiring to EU membership. You get a lot of that. And the volume right now is about 300 million. And so Georgian companies can take loans for upgrading their technologies, reducing their energy consumptions, lowering their carbon emissions, getting building and technical assistance, and that kind of thing. So we have a big program going, but I think Georgia has a long way to go. And now, the closer you get to Europe, the more intense the partnership becomes. So if Georgia were at some point to open negotiations, then more programs kick in. We call them pre-accession funds, because we're negotiating with you to join the European Union because we want you to join. So we will help you to join. And all those programs will multiply. We say more for more. But the further you move away from the EU, then the basis of our relationship has changed and you become just another country out there like many other countries, let's say Azerbaijan or Armenia or Central Asian countries, and then it's less for less. Georgia has been enjoying a privileged relationship with the EU because you had such a hard time, because you said Euro-Atlantic integration, because you made so much progress on it, because you're such nice people, because we have a connection, right? But if you say that connection doesn't matter to us, we're not interested anymore in the EU, and that's what the signals are saying to us right now, then we will reduce you to a normal country. And like Uzbekistan, maybe.
How we can get back to the path of the EU integration, and what would be your, as we near to the end of our interview, what would be your recommendation to the stakeholders, of course the government, but also the business sector, what we can do more in order to get back to the path of the integration?
So, I mean, if the people want to join the EU, they have to tell the government, we are the people we would like to join the EU. You know, the elections are very controversial, very contested. What we can say is that there were irregularities in so many areas that it doesn't pass the standard for an EU candidate. If in an EU member state there were elections with so many irregularities, we would all say, what is going on there? It's not acceptable. In the elections, that message didn't seem, I'm not sure, did that message come out or not? Anyway, so if the people want to join the EU, they should tell the government, do what's necessary to join the EU. What's necessary to join the EU has been written down 1,000 and 10,000 times. Right now, the 9 points are necessary to get closer to the next step. You have to revoke the law on the transparency of foreign influence. We can't just improve it here or there. That's not happening. It has to disappear. You have to look again at this LGBTQ law because you're discriminating certain minorities in your country, and that's illegal in the European Union. And you have to talk, you have to stop talking badly about the EU, claiming that we are the enemies of Georgia when we're not. And that's still going on every day. Every day. Every time I open the news, I hear that I'm some kind of a dangerous agent. I came here as a friend and a partner, and you said that German government supports. That's taxpayers' money. That's German bus drivers, German nurses, German civil servants like me. We're all paying part of our tax for Georgia for 30 years, and a lot of privileged money. So how to get back on track, it's all been written down. Everyone knows, and certainly your government knows. Because one of the things we do is we give a lot of scholarships too. And a lot of people in your government and your parliament have benefited from our scholarships. They are educated in law and other fields in Germany. They know what to do. Like the old commercial, just do it. But if you don't do it, then bye-bye Georgia. No more EU.
We don't want to see that. Thank you so much, Ambassador Fischer, for this very interesting interview, for being honest and being a true friend of Georgia for these many years. Thank you for the support that you are providing to Georgian people right now. We do appreciate your support sincerely. So I hope that our relations will continue, will get stronger, and Georgia will get back on the path to the EU integration.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.